Recently, I posted a YouTube short uh, about the problem of evil. Uh, it was a stitched together clip of Alex O'Connor and John Lennox, and essentially, I was challenged a little bit in the comments on that because it's a short clip. I mean, you can't explain anything in the space of time of a YouTube short. You just can't. But it did what it was meant to do. It sparked the conversation. So I want to take this video to explain what natural evil is and what the secular objections to theism are based on the problem of evil, or the problem of natural evil specifically, and then explain kind of a Christian response to it. So let me front load this a little bit and say that philosophically, this is so there's such easy explanations from the Christian side that to try to get around a lot of the nebulous areas of the objection, there's this idea, and it was talked about first by William Rowe, who I don't know much about, and I'm not going to pretend that I do, but he conjectured that there was unnecessary evil and unnecessary suffering and gratuitous suffering. These are interchangeable terms, but he wanted to explain that, or to prove that, by hypothetically talking about a fawn trapped in a forest fire. So we have there's a lot of problems with that. I don't want to get into that, but I just wanted to say that this is not the gotcha that I think most people at the popular level might think that it is. So anyway, I want to get into the Christian explanation of suffering, specifically in the form of soul-building theodicy. Just to briefly talk about that, it's this idea that we go through suffering to build character, or we observe other people's suffering to build overall virtue in society. And how this works is, for example, there are virtues that wouldn't even exist if suffering didn't exist. For example, courage. You can't have courage without something to be courageous about, and that's how you can explain how some of the suffering does exist. Gratuitous suffering and this sort of unnatural suffering to a level that you could try to make an argument that, well, a loving God wouldn't make this kind of suffering, is almost unfalsifiable. There's no way to prove that there's no reason for someone to suffer. But what we do know from the Bible, I'm going to present that to you now. And when I'm done with that, I want to get into an actual heart-to-heart, because someone who's looking for this topic is in an emotional state that a lot of these answers will not help you. So at the end, I want to help you with that. But let me just get through the reasoned response and the Christian response, and then get to a more practical approach. Okay, so first of all, there's this idea by some groups that maybe God exists, but doesn't have that kind of full control. So, like, he can watch it happen, but doesn't interject himself to make things happen and not happen. Now, if you've read the whole Bible, it's obviously an unbiblical view. let me just read to you what Job says on this issue. I'm going to read from part of Job 37. I'll let you find it on your own, but I'm going to use the King James for inclusivity. And this says, "By the breath of God frost is given, and the breath of the waters is straitened. Also by watering he wearieth the thick cloud, he scattereth his bright cloud, and it is turned round about by his counsels, that they may do whatsoever he commandeth them upon the face of the world in the earth. He causeth it to come, whether for correction, or for his land, or for mercy." Okay, so what is this saying about natural evil and the things that happen in the world? It says there's 3 reasons why that happens, why these things happen. He says, he causeth it to come, whether for correction. So there is sometimes a corrective component in suffering or in natural disasters and so on. And it says, or for his land. Now there's an ecological and sociological argument to be made that one person's suffering affects the whole community of humans, and that can be a good response. Or for mercy. So there's even an understanding in this passage that suffering can occur for a good reason, like something that results directly from that suffering has a good meaning and a good intent and a good result at the end of the suffering. Okay. So what, according to the Bible, what led us to where suffering exists? This in part answers another objection from secularists, where they're saying, hey, why would God create a world in which there's suffering? Well, the answer is he wouldn't, and it didn't. God created the world without suffering. Suffering came into the world by the actions of people. Let me read it to you, okay? This is from Genesis 3. It says, this is after Adam and Eve have sinned. They're getting their punishment pronounced and getting explained to them what's going to happen from here on out. It says, "And unto Adam he said, Because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree of which I commanded thee, saying, Thou shalt not eat of it, cursed is the ground for thy sake. In sorrow shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life. Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, till thou return unto the ground. For out of it wast thou taken, for dust thou art, and unto dust shalt thou return." Now, it says, "In sorrow shalt thou eat of it." This means that suffering from disease or health, these kind of problems that you would call natural evil, something that, it's not one person causing to another, it's nature causing to a person, are unnatural. They're not the created state because of what Adam did. And I want to emphasize that we don't know the breadth of the problem of sin. We don't understand just how far away from that original creation this puts us in place. And so what God is telling him is, hey, because you've done this thing, this is the stuff that's going to happen to you. Now, there's further pronouncements of things, but I wanted to really point that out because it talks about in sorrow, and there's no sorrow before this point. So this is the reason for all kinds of suffering, particularly in the realm of natural evil. Okay, so does suffering only happen to bad people? In other words, there are people that will go through something and they'll think, what did I do that God would do this to me, right? If there's a God, why would he do that to me? So there must not be a God because I can't think of anything I did. And so, and that ends up being an objection to God. So, does suffering only happen to bad people? The answer is no. Okay, I want to read this part to you. This is from John 9. It says, "And as Jesus passed by, he saw a man which was blind from his birth, and his disciples asked him, saying, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" So the disciples thought, hey, this guy is blind and was blind from birth, so who sinned? Is it because of his sin or his parents' sin? That, this is like a permanent punishment his whole life. And it says, Jesus answered, "Neither hath this man sinned, nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him." So someone who is living with debilitating condition or disability, permanent disability, these kinds of forms of human suffering are specifically so the works of God can be made manifest in that person. Because there's lots of things that can be meant by Jesus here. I'm not trying to pigeonhole and say this is what it means, but I will say that if you have a long-term disability, a congenital problem, so on, the reason could be that other people can look at you and appreciate what they have, and that you can become a better person than you might have been without that issue. And I will say some of the best people I've ever met are people who had these kind of conditions. They care about other people more than most people. And so anyway, going further, is there comfort in suffering? What comforts are there from God in suffering? I want to read to you Psalm 46, part of it. It says, "God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore will not we fear, though the earth be removed, though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea, though the waters thereof roar and be troubled, though the mountains shake with the swelling thereof." Selah. Now that's the first three verses. But what I want to emphasize there is that this is the reaction you're given, the example you're given in Scripture of how to react during suffering, what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to feel, is this. And that's what an old-timey preacher used to say is easy preaching and hard living. I think that's pretty accurate. It's hard. It means something when you feel, if you can feel this way in a hard time, in a major trouble, in a burden that seems impossible, then I believe there is a greater reward at the end for that. And if you can't get there to the point of being almost appreciative of your problem, which is, that's hard. But if you can't get there, I want to read to you a couple. Well, I'll read to you just one more verse because I'm running sort of over what time I thought this would take. But I want to read Revelation 21:4. It says, "And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away." This means that this is the last book. This is the finale of the whole instruction manual here. And it says, hey, at the end, all this stuff, all this heavy burden that you had, the stuff you carried in life, the stuff you thought, man, God must hate me, this stuff all ends. And then for the rest of eternity, after that blink of life, when you go into eternity, it's gone. It's all gone. Wiped away. Insignificant, even. So that's the Christian responses to the problems of natural evil. Let's list them again so you understand kind of what I'm talking about. Talking about natural disasters, talking about disease, talking about suffering, even in the form of, say, watching someone else debilitate from disease. This is what we're talking about. Let's talk about probably the hardest situation I could possibly think of. Let's talk about childhood cancer. Let's talk about watching an infant in pain and what that can mean. See, I have this page of notes that I wanted to get through, and I've got through them. But I know there's going to be people that I want to watch this, that none of this helps. They can't fathom, this might be a reasonable response. They can't understand it. They're in a place where it just hurts. Everything hurts. How could this be real? How could this be what's happening? And for that specific example, for a child suffering, and you can't understand, they didn't do anything, and you're trying to think, God, I'll do anything, just take this away from my child. The one thing I can tell you with absolute certainty is that there is a reason. I don't know what it is. You don't know what it is. But there is a reason and a purpose. It's not pointless suffering. It's not needless suffering. It has to happen, and it hurts. But as John Lennox said in the short I did not long ago, as a Christian, I absolutely believe that God is fair. Whatever someone suffers in life and has to go through, whatever that is, He makes it right in eternity. Even if their whole life is a matter of days and is endless pain and agony and crying and hurting, God did it for a reason, and we'll make it all right in that small blink of extreme suffering is leveled out across eternity. And whatever reason that had to happen, and believe me, the God I serve, the God of Christianity, Jesus Christ, would not do that if there were no reason. And on the other side, where people use this kind of suffering as proof that God doesn't exist, because God wouldn't do that. The only response you can give from that side of the aisle is that stuff just happens sometimes. And to me, that is probably the most insufficient response. And I think I'll end the video here. And thank you for watching.